everyone. Welcome. Jen and I are going to be talking about the solar plexus today. As you know, Jen and I always go live at 3 o'clock on a Monday afternoon so that you can start learning all about the areas of your human design chart that you are curious about. Now, Jen is amazing. She comes from a therapeutic background. I'm coming from a more marketing and design background, and we're here to bring you all the information together to help you find success. So she's coming on now. Here she is. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Yes, thank you so much for joining us. This is,
So
I think, one of our favorite colors, right?
it is. It is. We're talking about the solar plexus. It's all about your emotional centers. So we're doing solar plexus today, which is an energy center in your human design chart that really regulates your emotions and how you show up and how you are um, presenting yourself in the online space, in the world, in life. And of course, all humans, we need to learn how to emotionally regulate ourselves, right? That's one thing, especially in the world of business, in the world of employee, in the world of being a parent. And this is what the solar plexus is all about.
So I've been falling into a rabbit hole of evolution. And I love this center because it really is about our spirit consciousness and our evolution, right? It evolved, it split from the spleen. So you could say the spleen and the solar plexus are both about the nervous system and that intelligence that we know, but we don't know, right? Emotions are chemical cues that our body gives us, tells us, especially for emotional authorities. So this center is so important, and it's important to our alignment too, whether you have it defined or undefined. So really being aware of what this center, how this center works for you, can really change your life, can give you permission to feel, to allow your emotions and really detach from them.
Yes. And I love how you said that, Jen, because I know for me, finding out that I had emotional authority, so my solar plexus being defined, at first I was a little bit like, oh no, like I don't want to be emotional, right? I don't want to have that because it feels really hard. And also we're taught as young women to not really show our emotions, right? We're supposed to be the good girl and do the right thing and don't cry and don't show your emotions. And so for a lot of us women, we've had this suppressed. And so to find out we have this emotional authority, it's somewhat a little bit of a relief, but then because you're like, oh, I am supposed to feel this. I am supposed to move through this. I am supposed to wait, 24, 48, 72 hours before I make a big decision, in life or in business. But there's also a part of it because of that conditioning that you sort of just go like, oh no, like I don't know how to use this activated system. I don't know how to really present this to the world. And that's kind of what we're hoping to crack a little bit of some light on for you today. So go ahead and, if you are defined or undefined, if you don't know, let us know so we can support you in figuring that out. But drop in the comments if you do know, and maybe a question that you might have around it as we kind of continue to talk about the solar plexus and the emotions and the emotional waves that come along with it.
Yeah. And just if you're new to human design or don't know where to look, you grab your free chart, look at the triangle on the right side of your chart. Also, you can look within the description to find your authority. If your authority says emotional, part of half of the world with an emotional authority, that means that you have a defined solar plexus, right? Defined, colored in solar plexus equals emotional authority. So if you are part of that half of the world, like Mistral and myself, will be talking about the defined emotional authorities. And if you don't have an emotional authority, you have one of the other six. And that triangle on the right side of the bottom of the body graph is white. You are undefined. And both are really important to know because you can be conditioned and dysregulated regardless of whether you're defined or undefined. So, Mistral, do you, with the non-emotionals, right? Let's start with the non-emotionals because we're trying to pack so much, right? I said to Mistral earlier, I typically do a 2 to 3 hour workshop just on the solar plexus and emotional authorities, and we're trying to cram this into a half an hour. So, starting with the non-emotionals, that half of the world, Mistral, do you see any patterns? Anything, really that stands out for non-emotionals?
I think what I've come interaction with most myself now, my whole family is emotional. And so my parents, my siblings, my family, so my immediate family, my own children and my husband. So my experience is really with a defined emotional center versus an undefined. But when I have worked with somebody who has undefined, I find that they get confused because they're like, oh, that's why I don't have any emotions. And I'm like, no, that's not really why you don't have no emotions. That comes from something else. But it's more about the energy that flows through there and how you can then leverage that energy. But when I've started diving in with some of these clients, it's been more about they haven't known how to regulate or they've struggled to regulate their emotions, which is typical, right, of most people, regardless. So it's not necessarily an undefined or a defined, but sometimes there can be different conditioning that happens. And what I've noticed is as we've dove into this is that some of these women say that they feel emotions so intensely and they feel that they have trouble sometimes processing that information because maybe they haven't known how to in the past or they haven't been taught to do it in a way that feels safe or secure for them. And so that's something that I've noticed is that and then they've cut themselves off from those feelings, which gives them that sense of like, oh, it makes sense that I'm undefined because I don't have emotions, which, like we kind of giggled about before, is not actually true.
Yeah.
And I know,
Yeah.
Jen, with your experience, you have a lot more information around this undefined center because you have worked with more people in that area.
Yeah, I think what like the key with the undefined solar plexus being a non-emotional is to have non-attached clarity. Like you are here to gain emotional wisdom, right? Yes, the center is about emotional intelligence, but everyone has the capability to be emotionally literate. You can know emotions. But for non emotionals, undefined solar plexus, it's really about taking a step back, really identifying are these my emotions? If they are mine, let them flow, non attached. Or are they someone else's? Let me witness them. Let me see what I can learn. But it's really important. This is where emotional boundaries come in. That, yes, an undefined solar plexus will amplify and absorb emotions of everyone else. So if you're mistaking those for your own, they are going to be near impossible to process, ultimately because they're not yours. And if you're
Mm.
not clarifying what is mine, what is not mine, you're going to become conditioned to. You're going to hold on to them, especially if you cut off from them. Oh, the years of clients that I have seen that we have just had to work on, like it's okay to look at your emotions. You are safe, right? We really have to cultivate that safety of it is okay to feel. So there's more of like societal conditioning, I think, that comes into here. But having an undefined solar plexus with a couple of gates, in my experience, is extremely challenging because there is a lot of work to do here. If you have no gates, your solar plexus, that triangle is completely white. There are no hanging gates, there are no colors, no gates activated. You are meant to be a mirror, an emotional mirror, just to reflect emotions back. Like Mistral, you said, you still have emotions. You're a human being. We are sentient beings. We are here and we feel, but just kind of that caring observer. Oh, okay, I'm feeling that. That's interesting. And let it pass. Just like meditation and mindfulness, right? The thoughts come in and the thoughts go out. Same with emotions.
Mm.
We don't need to attach to them. We can just let them flow. And I know that's easier said than done, but
Yeah. But I love how you said that about the fact that you really are the mirror, because that should feel really empowering to somebody who has a center that's fully undefined to just be like, oh, great. Now I can know what to do with this energy as it comes through me. I can just silently observe it and kind of reflect it back out and know that it's not mine to hold on to, or it's not mine even to begin with. And so that should feel really, really empowering for somebody. And I hope that that's what they can take away from this. And then, of course, go grab Jen's workshop, because clearly, if you've got more things you want to dive into around maybe deconditioning or learning more, that's the place to go and get that information.
Yeah. And I think the last thing that I have to say for undefined solar plexus would be, especially when it comes to business. And if you want to say anything more to this, Mistral, it's really about coming into your own authority. Like, make
Mm.
sure for all non emotionals that you are not making emotional based decisions. Yes, the decision comes from your body, but it does not come from your emotions. Um, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about that more in all of our other lives as well. But yes, coming back to our authority and really understanding exactly what the decision is for us to make is huge here, right? And our emotions, if we haven't had practice regulating them, can really take us up for a train wreck. And I will not lie that I have had those experiences. And so, learning about my emotional solar plexus and learning how to really harness correct decision making has been huge for me. Huge.
Absolutely. And if, I can really hammer in anything from my 10 years plus experience as a therapist, as a mental health counselor, is to learn emotional regulation. You are the one in charge. You are the only one who can control that. You are not in control of anything around you, let alone other people's emotions. So when you can really detach from others' emotions and really work to regulate, to calm, to soothe your own emotions from an internal state, oh, you are really set up to respond to the world.
Yes, yes, yes. And that was probably the hardest thing for me to learn, because I am fast. I'm a manifesting generator. I want to make decisions fast. I want to move fast. I want to go places quickly. And this pondering, waiting for the right information to drop in was actually really challenging for me at the start. But now, a couple of years into my discovery of human design and really leaning into my own, I'm have found that it's so empowering to have that. And when I actually give myself permission to wait, then when I actually make that decision, it feels more aligned. It feels like it's coming from a space of intention and integrity and alignment versus rush, scarcity, fear, lack. I just got to make this decision because everyone else is making the decision, right? And that is a part of societal conditioning right there. But having the power to say, oh, I don't have an answer for you right now, or give me 48 hours or 72 hours, is really empowering. And it kind of puts you back in a place of like, leaving behind people pleasing, for example, leaving behind, which really happens with an undefined center as well as a defined center. We all, I think, struggle with the people pleasing. But it allows you to leave that behind and really step back into the ownership of what this is your life. You have control of your emotions and you get to decide. And only you can take that into your hands to allow yourself to do that.
Yeah, I think it's really important to make a distinction that in a way, you and I are double waiters, right? We have the emotional authority, so we need to sleep on it and wait. But, well, and projectors need to wait for the invitation. Generators and manifesting generators need to wait to respond. So not only does our authority say wait, but our strategy also says wait.
Yes, yes. And that's a good point, when you say it like that, because a lot of us don't like to wait. A lot of us want to have that decision straight away. And society, especially if you've been in the coaching world and you've purchased a coaching package from somebody on a phone call because they've made you feel pressure to buy something, and you've regretted it later, that's your authority saying, you didn't do what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to wait to respond, and you're supposed to wait for your emotional wave to come into neutrality, which again was one of the hardest pieces that I had to learn about making a decision in an emotional high versus an emotional low and really coming into neutrality. But once you figure that out for yourself, it's really quite easy. And I mean, the decision makings we're talking about are sort of bigger decision making, right? We're not talking about what we're going to have for dinner. Typically, you can decide that pretty straight quickly.
Right. It's really, they always say the big four, but I always miss one of the four. It's about like work, career,
Mhm.
relationships, moving, and other, I guess, just big life decisions. But
Yes.
that's where you really need to use your authority, especially the emotional, to really fully ride your wave. And speaking of riding the wave, Mistral, do you want to kick off for our half of the world of defined emotionals, just like ourselves?
Yeah. So basically, everybody who or anyone who has this sort of defined emotional center, right? There's a bunch of different gates in there, but there's also people who have channels that will connect them. And some of those channels will give you a different type of emotional wave that you need to follow depending on which one you have. And some of us have one, some of us have multiples, depending on who you are. I, in this case, have two. And I was just telling Jen before we hopped on, I said, Jen, you're the expert here in the solar plexus because while I have emotional solar plexus authority, I've also been kind of not, I don't want to say ignoring it, but almost like nervous to really lean into it the way that I want to because of my own conditioning, right? So this is me being honest as a coach that this sort of human design piece does take time to dive into. It does take time, especially sometimes it's easier to coach other people than it is in ourselves. And so when we're thinking about this emotional wave, it's understanding how yours works and what you are looking for within it, right? And so when we have, like, I have a family of emotional authority, I have a family of different emotional waves. And so learning to also help my children ride out their waves and my husband learn to how to do his wave and myself learning my own wave has been a very interesting process in our household because sometimes we're all in this emotional turmoil and somebody has to calm everybody down. Typically it's me.
Yeah, it's important to be aware of and honor others' emotional waves, those emotionals that do have this emotional wave. And there are four different types of waves. So, I mean, it is challenging enough to have one of those waves, like myself. I have the tribal wave. Your wave is based on the circuitry, what circuit the channels you have defined are on. So mine is a tribal wave. And it was such a relief when I learned about this because I was like, oh, this perfectly explains my roller coaster of emotions that go up and down and build until what's called ratchet. They completely drop down. And this is where, like, emotionally, I lose it. I need to go into my room and cry and just release all of these emotions from myself so that I can come back to my baseline, which really, in my wave, I don't really have a baseline. It's more of riding it, and it's really cultivating the self trust that I'm going to move along my wave.
Yep.
So Mistral has a little more challenge having two waves that are not the same. They're different. And each wave has its own triggers too, and things that help calm it. So when you have two emotional waves, you have to really do like double awareness to see how your wave moves. Like one of your waves, the individual wave, is usually on it has a baseline and certain
Yep.
little things trigger you into spike up, but then you come right back down. So it's through those spikes that, you get really excited or you get really down, but it's a trust that, oh, I'm just here right now. I'm going to come back to my baseline, and it's moving through that up and down, right? One full cycle of your wave to have the clarity. How do I feel about this on my baseline, on my high, on my low, to learn, right? What the emotional information is telling you. And then
Yeah.
we have the collective wave, which is something unique all on its own that's really fueled by desire. It's what you desire. And it's, kind of a straight line. It gradually builds until you hit the top and then you plummet back down. And then you build and you hit the top and then you plummet back down. So when you have two waves, you really have to, well, let me say it this way. All emotional beings need to constantly check in. Where am I on my wave? How am I feeling? Because the wave is not emotions. While, yes, you can kind of tack it as like, hi, great, positive emotions, lower vibrational emotions. It's an energy. You're riding that high vibrational of love, joy, ecstasy. And then you're coming down to melancholic, sad,
Mm.
depressed. And all of those emotions are valid. They hold space and they're so important to allow for and to heal. So with two waves, you really kind of have to check in, like which wave am I feeling? Sometimes one plays more of a role, especially if these channels, these waves are more conscious or unconscious, right? It's so unique. So I had a client with two waves, and through really navigating them, she was able to uncover one wave was more about things externally, like that were triggering her, that, was day-to-day life, things that she needed to do. And one was more functioning, more quiet and a little more internally. And sometimes they would pair up and sync together, and other times they would be opposites. So it really was this surrendering to, I have emotional waves. Where am I at now? How do I be clear? How do I ride a full cycle? What clarity, what decisions do I need to make that are in my best interest?
Yes, yeah. And I think what I love about what you were just saying there is the fact that when you do, and like I said, I honestly, like with this emotional wave, it's been a journey for me to figure it out because a part of me was in denial around it. And I had to really like come around to just being like, all right, this is the part of who I am. And, with my collective wave, it's funny that, to me, this reminds me of what I used to say. I used to get almost like everything's great, everything's great, everything's great. And then it's like volcanic explosion, everything's going wrong, right? And then you recover from that and it's like everything's great, everything's great, everything's great. And it's almost like something like one last little grain of salt like explodes the volcano. That's kind of how I describe like my collective wave, because I feel like that's kind of what I do. And those are kind of external forces for me where things are happening outside and I can handle the pressure, I can handle the pressure, I can handle the pressure. And then that one little extra piece of pressure makes it explode, right? Whereas on my individual wave, I feel like this is more in tune with what I'm feeling inside. And so I'm
Right.
so glad you described that, lady, because that kind of, when you said that, it just like, oh, that just put it into full perspective for me. So that, how sometimes someone will say something that's that little key that unlocks it for you. So that was beautiful. And that is more like an up and then a baseline and then a down and then a baseline. And that relates to me around just my emotions around like my, what's happening in my life at any given time with the choices that I'm making, or if I'm with my friends, or if I'm feeling a little bit lonely, or if I'm, so it's, I think more of like a personal feeling to myself and how I feel those. And so it's beautiful to separate the two. And then, yeah, I haven't yet worked out if, when they come together, but that's something I'll be looking for now because they are totally different. But understanding them is what allows me then to create those decisions in my business. And so in the past, when I've made bad business decisions, it's when I've bought that expensive coaching package on the phone because I felt like I had to do it. And then 2 days later, I might be like, oh, I don't really want to, but I've already committed. So now I'm just going to do it. And then this is another thing with women where people pleasers and we don't want to ask for things back or change things or upset the cart, right? And so we just kind of move forward with it. Whereas if I had have sat and honored my emotional wave, I might have come to a conclusion of like, this isn't the right program for me, or this isn't the right piece for me, and been able to say, no, thanks. Right. And so that's where that emotional, like figure out if you have the emotional authority and like follow that.
Yeah. And I think the other point here that's really important with the emotional wave, I mean, gosh, there's so many important pieces. And yes, if you're interested in this, on my website, I have a recording from a past workshop that I've done. It is $22. I want everyone to be able to have that. So DM me and I'm happy to send you that direct link. So the last piece that we'll talk about this is that the emotional wave, yeses and no, kind of happens on a percentage. So most emotional authority yeses are only 60 to 80% yes. I have had so many business decisions come up in the past week. Like, do I invest in this? Do I do this? Do I do that? And for most of them, I've been 50-50. Yes, I could do this. It would be a challenge. No, I could easily not do this. But I have to keep checking in on like, well, where is the tipping point? Right? Am I to 60%? Is this a yes? Because there are many yeses that I make where I'm like, sure, I'll just do it anyway. Like it's not a no. It's not a 50-50. It's like, okay, sure. Yeah, I'm okay with that. So I've gotten to know that my 60%, it is an aligned yes for me. Whereas an 80%, that's a lot easier. And I'm like, yes, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go invest in that. And it is very, very rare that I have full 100%. So many people out there are like, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. That's not necessarily true for emotional authorities because it can be a hell yes at 60%, right? It might
Yes.
not be 100%, but that's okay. So really, like we don't need having like we don't need to have enough emotional awareness already, but here's another layer to really be aware of, essentially asking yourself, what is the percentage of yes here? Because if you're at 50%, it is still a no.
Yeah, and that's a really good point to make, actually, because I feel like that's where people can get stuck, right? Like it's kind of a yes, it's kind of a no, and then of course when women out or coaches on in the online space are saying, "Oh, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no," then that can be very confusing for somebody who doesn't yet understand their emotional wave. And so it's this advice that comes out is to always have discernment, right? And always, as human design mentors and guides, we will always tell you to come back to your inner intuition and inner knowing because you know if this is right for you or not. If you allow yourself to tune in and listen to what your body and your emotional wave, or not emotional wave, but a different type of authority is actually telling you. And that is so, so important.
Yeah. And all clients, if we hop on a discovery call together and I know that you're an emotional authority, 9 times out of 10, if you try to give me an answer in the moment, I'm like, nope,
Nope.
you sleep on this. We'll check back in tomorrow or in a couple of days. You ride your energy, see where you're at, but we're going to check back in. And I want to make sure that this is still yes. Because if it's a no, it's not good for you. And really, it's not going to be good for me either. So there's so
That's right.
many pieces to this. So, on that note, just to wrap it up, tomorrow is Mistral and Eyes, whatever that correct grammar is. Um, our free HD Q&A. This is an
Mhm.
hour Eastern time, 12 to 1 p.m., where you bring all your human design questions to us. And we're going to chat. We're going to see where the conversation goes. And we are going to share our wealth of knowledge with you. Oh, we're in the transit of gate 27 of nurturing, of making sure that you're pouring from an overflowing cup. So I feel like that
Yes.
is so great tomorrow. I'll make sure to nourish myself so that I can pour from an overflowing cup. To bring all your personal and professional questions, right? I'm happy to
Yes.
personally. Mistral's got the business expertise. Yeah.
And on that note, it's a full moon tomorrow. So it's a great time for us to call in our manifestations. And one of the things I love talking about in the human design is how you can use it to actually manifest. So especially if you're in business or just in life and you're trying to call something in, this is a great place to also bring any questions that you might have tomorrow around that because it's the full moon. So let's call in the intentions that we want to create because, as the full moon shrinks, we want to be releasing all of those limiting beliefs that may be holding us back. And human design holds so many of those for us. And it could be so profound for you to be able to learn this about yourself. And so come join us. If you want to come, drop it in the comments and we will make sure we get the link over to you.
Yes. And we'll be back next Monday at 3
Mhm.
p.m. for our next center, perhaps the sacral. Is that where we're going to go
Ooh,
next?
I feel like that sounds pretty good. That's a good next authority.
Yeah, yeah. We'll say the sacral next week. So all of our generators, manifesting generators who have that access to consistent power, and all of our non-sacrals, like myself, who need to gain that non-attached clarity of energy and wisdom. So hopefully we'll see you tomorrow at noon. Otherwise, we'll see you back here next week.